Welcome to Workplace Realities, and today is a special day. We're going to talk to Chris Massie. Yes, same last name. This is my son, and we started a company called Job Shift. Today, we're going to go through a little bit about what happened there. Why did we decide to start a new company when we already have about staffing kicking? But you know what? We are entrepreneurs at heart, and we were here to help the future of our youth. And this is one way that we're going to do that. So, Chris, welcome to Workplace Realities with About Staffing today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm grateful to participate in this conversation with you.
I probably forced you into it anyways. I typically do that. Let's talk about Job Shift, because that's the reason we're here today. You know that we've got something kicking pretty good here. It's kind of exciting, and we are making some serious impact in the community. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about how we started, where we're heading, and what it means to the youth of today and those who need help looking for work. So it's different than about staffing. Job Shift isn't placing people. We're actually guiding them through the process of how to find work. So that's your gig. You're in charge of this one. So what do you want to start with today?
So this means a lot to us. Job Shift was created as a platform to really help people accelerate their path to employment. And you and I have been in this game for a long time, you much longer than me. And we found that through all of the interviews that we conducted, the job placements in a variety of companies and industries over the years, that there were certain patterns and characteristics that people just don't know about when they're looking for a job.
Hard to believe, actually, that, over the years and years and years of doing placements of people in all kinds of jobs, that I still get the same questions as you do over and over and over again when they're looking for work. And it kind of occurred to us that maybe we should just start answering some of those questions, and then it built into a platform. So it's kind of interesting how it kind of formulated one way and grew into something else just by answering questions for people.
Yeah, and I think that the need for something like Job Shift has only increased over time. We saw a lot of disruptions to the labor market through COVID.
Yeah.
And we had some real concerns for the people at the bottom of the labor market, those that are just graduating from high school or post-secondary, looking for their first job, looking for their experience. We had concerns about those people coming out of the COVID pandemic. And I think given AI's intrusion into everything, artificial intelligence's intrusion into everything, that's only made the challenges for job seekers worse, especially those that don't have much in the way of experience looking for jobs.
My heart breaks for people,
Yeah.
when they say, I'm looking for a job and I don't know what to do. And especially for the youth. When we started, we were talking about newcomers as well, coming to a new place where they didn't have a community of support. But now it's really, really pushed into the area of youth. That unemployment rate for youth is really high.
It's scary.
And they're not really getting the guidance that they need to help them to find a job, let alone the right job.
Yeah.
So crazy how this just kind of went onto its own platform.
Yeah, and it's crazy how, with a clear vision and focus for what we wanted to accomplish, it could withstand some of these changes that are manifesting in the labor market today. So, perhaps it's worthwhile to mention briefly what Job Shift is.
Well, we should do that. I haven't been that great about doing that on all the podcasts so far. I just sort of introduce people and assume everybody knows everything about everything. So yeah, let's go into that, and maybe also a little bit about our relationship and our story, and how we decided to do this and do it together, and then also, yeah, what is Job Shift? What is that Job Shift anyways?
So I'll take the Job Shift question on, and you take the relationship and the story
Sounds good.
question on.
I'm good at that part.
So Job Shift is an online platform that people can sign up for that helps them accelerate their pathway to employment. And it's based on a 7-shift model or framework of the steps and elements of the process that you need to be thinking about. So shift 1, we start with my numbers, right? What does my budget look like? What are my needs? What is the market support for the kind of job that I'm looking for? What kinds of salaries are the average salary expectations?
What am I worth
What am I worth?
in this marketplace? That changes.
What a great way to frame it. What am I worth? And that is a real challenging question for people, right?
Yeah.
I even think that, new grads, experienced professionals, everybody struggles with that question. And there's no easy, simple answer to it.
Yeah.
So as part of our model, we help guide job shifters through answering that question, what am I worth? And shift 2 goes into my mindset. How do I build resiliency and
stress.
the attributes that are necessary to persevere through a very difficult process. And let's be frank, nobody wants to have to go through the effort of finding a job, and nobody enjoys it.
Yeah.
They just want the outcome. They want the job. So it's a real challenging process.
I've heard, actually, sorry to cut you off there, Christopher. I've heard over and over again that finding a job is a full-time job.
No doubt.
And that almost should be the name of that whole shift, is finding a job is a full-time job, and it's going to stress you right out. What do you do about that? And how do you manage those feelings and emotions that you're having?
It's going to beat you down. It's, it's a numbers game in a lot of cases, and, you're going to have to deal with a lot of rejection. You don't get signals back from the environment. It's very rare that you'll receive a human notification that your application was received, that it was reviewed, that you were screened in or screened out of the process. So you don't get feedback, you don't get signals. You just kind of have to keep pushing things forward. And that's where that persistence and that mindset really comes into play. So you may have noticed that when it comes to looking for a job, we've covered 2 shifts, and we haven't even really talked about the main aspects that people are used to when looking for a job. But that's where shift 3, 4, 5 onward gets into. So 3 is about your profile, right? And traditionally, we think about that in the form of your resume and your cover letter. I can't tell you enough how important those pieces are to your application process and getting them right, but they're not the only things. What does your social profile look like? What does your digital profile look like out there?
Well, employers are looking at that. They are looking at your social profile, and they are going to consider that when they are going to look at hiring you.
You betcha. Perhaps they're using technology to screen that as a function of your application. So some of these pieces in the process that employers used to look at maybe later on, you've interviewed a candidate, you maybe narrowed down to, a few that you want to select from, then you go and do your reference checking and your social profile researching. That doesn't happen late in the stage anymore. It happens earlier. So it's really important that any job seeker considers from the outset, what's my digital footprint? What's my profile look like online? How are people going to perceive me? And that could include things like comments or posts or images on Instagram. So you really have to be thinking holistically about your overall profile. Then we get
especially youth. I mean, they are smart, and they are social, and they are posting. And sometimes they're posting in the moment, not necessarily realizing that it's there forever, and that the employers do have the opportunity to go and dig and find out everything about those people.
And everything that exists on the internet exists permanently. It doesn't go away. We've all had that experience where we were feeling emotional and we put something up online, rage tweeting something. And, unfortunately,
No, don't do it.
Yeah, that can be a real risk for you to find the job that you're looking for. So, there's so much to know about your profile. And then we get into shift 4, which is all about your where you go to approach work, right? So where do you find the opportunity?
And is that networking? We put networking skills in there as well, didn't we?
You betcha. Networking physically, in person, in real life, networking digitally through the tools that are available, job boards, employment and staffing agencies. networking groups, community associations, volunteer organizations. There are lots of different mechanisms that you can have access to build your network, build your reach, and find companies that could be a good fit for you.
Mhm.
And then we get into, how to actually apply for
Oh,
those opportunities.
applicant tracking systems.
They're super important.
That's our world over here at About
Yeah.
Staffing.
And especially when you're doing a volume-based approach, lots of numbers involved, it's important for you to be able to keep track of what message did I send to this company? Where am I at in this process? So the tracking is a really key feature, and we built that into the technology to help people have instant, easy access to the tool that they need in the same place as they're doing the work. Then, let's say you get a few interviews, right? Well, how do I prepare for interviews? There's many different types of interviews: behavioral interviews,
Ugh.
situational
Yeah.
interviews, panel interviews. Then there's different mechanisms that companies use in the interview process: job shadowing, testing, work product examples. There's many different pieces involved in the interview process. And I often say with interviewing that it is a terrible proxy for the job that it's supposed to do, right? Interviewing is not a really good mechanism for evaluating, can this person do the job? Will they do the job? Do they have the skills for the job now and into the future?
Are they going to be responsible? Are they going to show up?
That's right.
I mean, who knows, right? The employer is looking for something perhaps even different than the candidates, and especially the youth looking for their first job. How do you navigate the first job? That's a toughie. They don't have experience. They are walking into an interview situation potentially, and they have no idea how to answer questions.
That's right.
No idea what an interview even looks like.
And what do you do when
why
you
are they
don't have
asking?
experiences to draw from? A lot of interview questions are designed around, tell me about a time you did X, Y, and Z, and what was the result? Well, what if you don't have that experience? How are you supposed to approach those questions? So these are the kinds of things that we think deeply about all the time because we're in it all the time. And like you keep pointing out, we care very much about the experience of job seekers.
Yeah.
Because it's not easy. And if you don't have practice for an interview, right? And so you go in and you get your first interview, you're really excited about this job, but you don't have any familiarity with what to expect inside of that interview, you could end up shooting yourself in the foot without even realizing it,
Yeah.
without even intending to do anything wrong. So preparation, I think, is one of the most important principles there.
And they beat themselves up. The candidates, the youth especially, beat themselves up about why they didn't get the job after they thought they were perfect for it, and why perhaps they didn't, pass the interview stage. And I feel for those people.
Yeah, because they often don't get feedback.
They don't get feedback, and they don't get honest feedback.
That's right.
So nobody says, "Oh, you really blew the interview." Very rarely. They get ghosted most of the time instead. So hopefully we help to alleviate some of these stress points for these people through the platform as well, which takes us to the next stage.
Yeah, which is negotiation. So let's say you've got an offer in front of you. What are the right questions to ask? Where are the levers that you can pull to maybe get more of what you want or sacrifice some things for other things, right? So oftentimes, we've seen people just accept an offer that's put in front of them, even though it didn't meet their expectations, didn't meet their market value proposition, but they just wanted a job so bad that they didn't want to rock the cart, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so this is where it's really helpful to have some tips on how to negotiate.
If you should negotiate. Might be a good enough offer as it is, or maybe it is your first shot and you just need to get the experience, but it introduces you to the right people.
Yeah.
You don't really think about those kinds of things. So sometimes you should negotiate and sometimes you shouldn't negotiate. Depends on the employer, depends on the offer, depends on the person's situation. And so we do go through all of those things in that shift.
Excellent point. And then lastly, you accept a job, maybe it's a job or a career opportunity, it doesn't matter. Then you have to be thinking about, okay, how do I effectively onboard Now, normally we think about
Mhm.
that as the company's responsibility. They have an onboarding program. They give you the policies and procedures. They get you to sign all these documents. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
We're talking about how do you show up with your best self on your first day, your first week, your first few months? How do you build relationships with your teammates, with your bosses, with suppliers, anybody that you might be interacting with? How do you figure out how do things actually work here? What's written and what's unwritten? What is this culture like? Now, that brings me to a thread that goes all the way through Job Shift, which is culture, right? When we think about culture, it's one of the most impactful determiners of success of a placement, right? More so than the knowledge that people have, the skills and the abilities. It's the culture. How well does a person fit inside of the team culture? How they do things, how they behave, what they appreciate, what they expect, those kinds of things. So we have
The unwritten.
yeah, the
It's
written and the
it's
unwritten.
exactly.
You know,
Yes.
companies will put core values on the wall and they'll say, this is who we are. But the people working there know that the experience is very different, right?
That's right.
So how do you pay attention to that if you don't have much in the way of work experience, right? How do you pay attention to these things? How do you know what's real and what's not? Culture, we think, is a major impactor, something that has a huge impact on the success of a placement. So there's lots of different places that we encourage our members in Job Shift to think about what culture am I looking for? What qualities and characteristics do I want to see inside of my teammates? You know, what would make me feel really good about showing up as my authentic self every day to do a job? So, as you can tell, there's a lot of intentionality built from decades of experience that we wanted to make available to as many people as possible to accelerate their pathways to employment. You can tell we're pretty passionate about these things, but I think
We are.
now would be a good time to share about our relationship and how that has evolved.
Well, yeah. So Chris is my son and has worked in the business since he was about 4. And so I think I hired my kids to help me, probably paid you off with popsicles, and has been inside the environment for many, many, many years. And so from that, Chris was working with me as a recruiter, operations, helped on every aspect of the business, and then the about staffing business. And then, when COVID hit, and the pandemic hit, everybody was suffering. We sat down and I had this idea, Job Shift, getting all these questions, but I'm not the developer. I am not the person to put it into a platform, but Chris is. And Chris is the presenter and meeting with schools and educators and nonprofits and groups of that are interested in Job Shift, which is our market. Is trying to get this platform into as many people's hands as we possibly can to help them out. And so Chris is helping, working with developers and building this platform. And it's been an interesting run because we work together. We work as a family here. And you're an owner of Job Shift. I'm an owner of Job Shift. And, we work together to try to make this work in the biggest possible way, the most community impact. And so, we cross paths all the time. We cross paths at dinner when he comes over for dinner. And we also cross paths at work every single day. And we have built this platform together. Even though I'm still working about staffing, we have Chris working in Job Shift to help it get into as many hands as possible. So that's a little bit about our relationship. And I think that it's going to be a successful long-term endeavor to help as many people as we can. I really want to get it into the hands of everybody in Alberta first. That's kind of my goal. I know you have bigger aspirations. I can see it going across the country. It is built in Canada for Canada. And I think to me that's really important, is to try to keep it within our borders if we can, and help as many people with the answers that they need to help them out. Lastly, I do want to talk quickly about the layout of the platform, because it's colorful. How are we addressing the youth? We changed it from a jobshift.com to jobshift.ca for the students out there and the youth. And how would you describe the playfulness of JobShift? Because it's not just information anymore. It's really engagement within the platform. How would you describe that?
Yeah, that's a great point and a great question. I would describe it as inviting.
Mm.
And I think that's a really important type of word for what people should experience. Because as I've said a couple of times now, the job search process is hard. It's demotivating. It wears you down. It breaks you apart. And
Yeah.
so we wanted a platform that is inviting and colorful and something that you look forward to interacting with. It's full of multimedia. There is a lot of text because you have things that you need to learn, but you can interact with the text in some interesting ways. There's videos, there's exercises, there's lots of cool stuff in there. So
It's playful.
yeah, playful is another good word too. And so, I think a good, healthy balance of things is important, right? So if you're doing hard, tough, routine work, it's helpful to have that balanced out with a sense of fun and playfulness. Again, my word was inviting. We want it to be something where you want to go back in to do the hard things that you need to do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not fun for sure to go and do up a resume for every job application that you're trying to apply for. So we try to help through that whole process. We do have some AI in there.
Yep.
That's certainly not my specialty, but I know that the platform is technologically advanced, and easy to use, easy to navigate for anyone who is interested. And of course, we are available for questions and that sort of thing. Is there anything else that I missed today other than you're my son, we're having fun, we want it in everybody's hands? Is there anything that I've kind of missed there that maybe we're looking forward to having my grandsons go through that platform, throwing it out there, helping them out find work
Absolutely.
too when they're ready for that. Too young still.
Yeah,
But
not
you know, I
not
mean,
that far off.
looking forward to that, Chris, when your kids are all out working.
Yeah, I am, but I am concerned about what the future is going to look like. However, I think there are some very clear signals that are emerging. You brought up AI, and there's been a big focus, culturally and societally about technology and what it's doing to us. But what we're seeing is that the pendulum is shifting in another direction, back towards human interaction. So, approximately 75% of people that are finding jobs these days are doing so through networks, activating their warm networks, right? The relationship side of things. Who do you know, right? Who's in your corner? Who's in your group? Who's in your community? And I think that will be a net positive for people, is to really, reinvigorate the relationship aspect. And I wanted to conclude here because I think that's been something that has made about staffing successful for so long, is how
30 years.
30 years this year. How do you approach relationships? It's a multi-party relationship between about staffing and candidates and employers. And you've always put a really big focus on the importance of relationships. And I think that, is imbued in the way that about staffing operates, and that's imbued into the job shift platform and what we're doing, and the work that I'm doing, building partnerships with educational institutions and job seekers and government agents and everybody in between. Relationships, I think, is the key word, and that's what I want to see, more of going forward from a society, a community, even an individual standpoint, is building up meaningful, collaborative, mutually beneficial relationships.
Well, and that will create results at the end for everyone. And we want the economy booming. And the only way to do that is to have everybody working.
Let's do it.
So let's do it. All right. Well, we'll end there today. And thank you very much for walking literally one door next door to my office from your office, which is awesome.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Didn't even have to find parking. Thank you for joining us today, Workplace Realities. Chris Massie, Sharlene Massie, thank you for joining.